Sworn up, except by my wife.
Yeah, that's a daily
But I will
occurrence.
get in there, but I'm still an alternate.
Yes, so we could elevate.
Sworn.
possibly, but-
If you need me as an alternate.
Okay.
All right, well, let's get this thing started.
Oh.
Here you go. Here we go. All right, I guess first order of business is call to order and let's find out who is actually here. Actually, everyone is here except for our select person representative.
Yeah, I did find out that they're
That's
going
right.
to start next month.
Okay. Very nice, I guess. And if that's the case, then our alternates do not need to vote. So, sorry guys. And by the way, from the alternate's perspective, the most senior alternate is the one who gets the first nod for voting. And
Gotcha.
most senior doesn't mean how old you
I
are.
know, I understand.
It's the order in which you
Yeah,
you swore to uphold the zoning ordinance of Jackson. So, Dick, you're in an odd position because you're neither here nor there.
well, I'm kind of an odd person, so that's good.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but, you know, while we're welcoming Dick as a member, full member of the planning board, I think for the 12th time. I mean, it's a rotating door, but I think well, I've been on the board, and I've only been on the board, I think, 7 years, 6 years, maybe 6 and a half. You've been on and off now, this is your at least third time.
I can't remember anything before 2000.
Well, that's good, I have trouble after counting past 3, so it's okay. Anyway, so I'm going to suggest that because you are a full member, that you get to vote, even though you haven't sworn as being a full member, you're still sworn as an alternate. So, voting members will include all the regular members, and because the select board representative is not here, we can't have somebody represent that person, so we'll only have 6 votes tonight.
I'm not sworn in at the moment, so.
But you are not being replaced by anybody else, therefore you are not grandfathered, but I believe the way the RSA is written is that until someone says that they're sitting in your seat, you're still good.
That's correct.
So, we're good, you're good. Sure you managed to get sworn in?
I did.
So you have, by the way, you have a right to be up at the table
I'm happy. I can hear.
if you,
I got a hearing aid.
if you prefer.
Yep.
So, because,
I wanted to have a good vision of it.
yeah, and I think the way, and that's just our rule of order. Anybody who's an alternate has a right to participate. And just the same way a member does, and does not need to be recognized as a member of the public. Welcome, you're public today.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. All right, so we've done the first 2 things. The third item is review and approve minutes of the March 9th meeting. Anybody have any issues with those things? We have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Our first order of real business, and that is every first meeting following the annual town meeting that we have to elect officers. So, I'm opening up the floor for nominations for officers.
nominate the present slate of officers.
I'll second that.
Was there any hesitation?
Are there any other nominations that we should be considering? All right,
Dang it.
dang. Everybody who's being nominated, are you guys okay?
Yep.
You're okay?
Okay.
I guess all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oh, that was allowed.
All right.
Resounding.
Since we have public tonight, thank you for being here. We don't always have public. Excuse, Hank is always here, so Hank is usually our public. And so I have to recognize you definitely being here most nights. But we don't usually have anyone other than Hank. So welcome. And now's your opportunity to say anything or talk about anything that's not on our agenda for this evening. So if you're here to talk about short-term rentals or anything else, the preliminary consultation, capital improvement plan, this isn't that. Anything else? Going once, going twice? All right. Yeah, we bought 10 minutes. We're right on schedule. All right, first order of business. There's a preliminary conceptual consultation. Do we have someone here who's ready to do that?
Yeah.
We'll recognize you. Can you identify who you are and come on up,
Can I come on up?
please?
So, I think we only have about 15 minutes tonight. It's going to take you 15
Well,
minutes.
you're 15 minutes on the schedule, but you
Okay.
know,
All right. I have a lot of material.
we already bought 5 minutes.
So I was hoping to kind of, in a way, like, use this as a little bit of a workshop with you guys, if that's okay. Maybe we can clear a little bit of space.
We're gonna take the important things out of it.
Is that okay? Here. We have some plans.
And just for the record, you are.
Yeah. Hi, everyone at home. I'm Nick Aceto with Aceto Landscape Architects, and my partner and I, Caitlin, and this is my 4-year-old daughter, Mia. We purchased and we now own the former Couples Massage building on
Okay.
87 Route 16.
Yeah,
And we've been working on the building and making some minor renovations.
making some good progress too.
Making a little bit of progress, a little bit at a time. And if you sense any urgency on my part, it's because we're living in the middle unit right now, 500 square feet between the three of us. So we're eager to kind of try to get this project kicked off and hopefully be a little favorable on it. And work with us.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. So maybe just to give you a quick intro on where we're coming from. And do you mind if I stand? Is that okay?
No, it's great.
I'll go to the chair, but what would you?
Great. Yeah, I like to move around.
Whatever, chair, if you want to
So-
pull up so you can see.
Sure, I'll take a look once you get there.
Yeah, you can pull up. So just to give a little background, my partner and I and our 4-year-old, we bought the former Couples Massage building at 87 Route 16. We have a landscape architecture and design business that we run out of Portland, and that's our main office is in the Old Port in Portland, but we have a little studio in the front space of that apartment building, and then we rent the other couple of units out. And as everyone knows, the housing market is really tight and difficult, especially in Jackson. I know, it's crazy. So that's news flash for everyone. So we've been kind of biding our time and living in one of our units and kind of doing the live work thing.
Kevin?
Do you want
Did
to,
you
do
wanna
you
call
want to see any of this stuff?
Yeah.
These are buildings.
kinda know it, but
We've been in touch with Kevin and Burr too. We've been in touch with both of them.
Okay.
I think they've taken a quick look at our plans at this point and generally, preliminarily endorse what we're trying to do. So
By the way, just before you run too far, just a reminder, this is a preliminary review, so anything we tell you tonight, we don't hold us to it.
Right, yep, it's,
And also the
Understood.
clock's not ticking.
That's correct, nothing, this is just totally informal, so.
sure. Yeah, and we understand
Both
that.
sides.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
this is very formal, it's,
This is kind of what we do, so it's, a lot of what you see here, there's a lot, but this is like part of our due diligence.
it's a
and-
nicer
and-
napkin than we usually get.
Yeah, it's a good napkin sketch, right? So we're doing our due diligence and we want to make sure this project can work. And so essentially what we're trying to do is we approached our neighbor, who happens to be Mike Mallett, who owns a lot of property in town. He owns and operates Red Fox. I think that's his more or less his day job at this point. And Mike is extremely pleasant to work with, we found. And we approached Mike with the idea, hey, would you be interested in selling us a little lot to build a house right next to our apartment building? So Mike owns this parcel. It's 30.43 acres. It has 480 feet of frontage on Route 16, so that's going to come into play in a minute. There's quite a bit of topography. If we flip over to the next, sheet. You can see some of the existing conditions here. So this is overlaying the 1990 survey. So this is the last full survey of the property that we were able to track down from deed search. And you can see another kind of important side note that's maybe more interesting than anything else is that this property was formerly subdivided into 4 lots, essentially, for a family. And the intent was for each of the family members to have a parcel to build on. Today, at least 2 of these lots would be non-conforming, interestingly enough, under current zoning. So, it's a 30-acre parcel. There's an existing leach field, that's number 2, pretty big leach field, and that takes the septic treatment for the Red Fox. So that's pumped all the way up to Mike's property here. Mike has built a home, which is complete and occupied at this point. That's the number 7, so further up on the hill below Duckhead. His driveway, this is also important, his driveway, even though it's not shown in the aerial, accesses from behind the Red Fox parking lot. So there's kind of a paved area in front of the restaurant, and then if you look left, there's a little driveway cut into the woods, and that kind of heads up to his home. So that's how he accesses his home.
Any of us who ski know that.
Okay, good. We're kind of new, so this is all like kind of new and discovery to us. There is a water line, as you may all know, an associated easement that runs through his property. And it runs through the golf course, and then it runs through, if you've ever skied through that portion of the trail, there's a large cleared area. There's both the septic field and there's another large cleared gravel area that Mike uses as kind of lay down yard area, basically. It's all flat, level, cleared, and there's a driveway accessing it from Route 16. Just note on utilities too, there is an overhead electric that runs up there as well. This is another just colorized version of the existing conditions plan, just so you can see a little more clearly the existing leach field is green, the driveway access up to number 7, that's his home. The ski trail in red, the water line easement that runs through the cleared area, and the existing driveway down to 16. And you can see the overlay of the existing setbacks. There's also a little cottage, that's number 3, that's up on the knoll, just off of 16. If you kind of look up off the road, there's a cottage up there. And it looks like that cottage dates back to the 30s or 40s. It's pretty old, but it's still outdated and the plan is to take it down. If I get stuck and run on too many sidetracks, feel free to interrupt me.
Quick question,
Yes,
you
yeah.
said you've got the separate lots there now, are they existing lots? or-
Sorry, good, that's a great point. So they've since been extinguished.
Okay, so
It's
they don't
currently
exist.
one large parcel, but that was just a historical note
Okay,
and one,
that's fine.
that's
You
where
don't have
we-
to worry about the lines.
Yep.
They're done.
exactly, yep. So little zoning overlay here to show that the parcel is essentially 1/3, 2/3, one-third in the village district, which is 500 foot offset from Route 16. And in the back, larger portion of the parcel is in the rural residential district. This is a quick slope analysis, just understanding. We pulled in topography from the state, from the GIS system, and just quickly ran a slope analysis, partially to illustrate where some of the ideal buildable envelopes might be if we were to build up here. Obviously, we don't want to build in the red areas, maybe not in the green areas, but in the lighter green areas. Maybe the darker green areas are really the shallowest slopes and the best sites for development. So Mike's home, of course, sits on this bench below Duckhead, below the ledge area that's labeled. The area that we're looking at for potential multifamily, and actually let me back up for 1 second too. So when we approached Mike to sell us a lot next to our building, he said, well, we have mutual interest because I'd actually like to build housing for some of my workers at the Red Fox. And he's wanted to do that for a long time, but never had the time or the wherewithal, I guess, to see it through. So kind of in exchange for him talking to us about this, we're helping leverage our skill set to help make his workforce housing happen. So just one point of note on the slope map is you can see there's Duckhead in the back, but then there's a big rocky steep knoll right on 16. The existing driveway skirts around that, and you can see there's a big green flat area behind the knoll. That's where the big clearing is. There's electric utilities, there's water, and there's access to the septic field up there. So this is all building up to something. Again, our due diligence here, just looking at the soil. So we pulled in the web soil survey, so we understand that Jackson uses soil-based lot sizing. And then these are some preliminary calculations that we think are fairly reliable up in the upper right here. So most of the site is a complex of soils. It's a Monadnock Berkshire complex, 15 to 35% slopes, category 2. Calculated the area, and then the minimum lot size based on that soil type would be 54,500 square feet. And Berg can, I think that's correct, but one of the engineers or surveyors would probably correct me, but that's what it appears to be, 54,500. So with that number, we did some calculations based on overall soils and the individual minimum lot areas for each soil type, and we arrived at 20 units allowable on this overall 30-acre parcel. So essentially, the site could be divided into 20 single-family home lots, or what you might see around town typically. As a cluster subdivision, it looks like around 37 units would be allowable. So a pretty substantial number of units. We're looking to do something much more modest for several reasons. One, I think Mike is interested in keeping things pretty simple and just providing enough housing for the employees, at his business at the Red Fox. And it's expensive to build and expensive to develop a big site like this, and there is a lot of topography to get into the site and access and bring utilities in. So this is kind of like the low-hanging fruit project, where the site is cleared, utilities are more or less in place, easy access. All you basically need to do is subdivide the lots and put up the buildings. So simple. So this is the subdivision concept, just the lot lines. Now, getting into the frontages and what we're doing here. So lot 1 is creating a lot for Mike's home, okay? And making his lot conform from what we understand. And making that lot conform would mean providing frontage on a public road. So that's why the lot is flagging down to Route 16 and providing him 150 feet of frontage, which is what we read as interpret as the zoning requirement. It should be noted that lot is partially in both the rural residential and village districts. So with the frontage being in the village district, we think 150 foot should apply to that lot. It should also be noted that his driveway will not need to utilize that frontage. There will be no need for that frontage. So it's just a technicality to meet a zoning requirement.
Does it also have frontage here on Green Hill?
It does, and that's another good point, so, let me keep going, that'll come into play. Lot 2 is the multifamily lot that we're proposing. So based on our calculation, we may need to adjust this, but we were figuring about 9 acres would be necessary to build about 8 to 10 units. And that's what Mike has expressed interest in doing, is just a simple 8 to 10 unit kind of duplex style attached dwelling unit. Not a big apartment building, you know, not single family homes, but attached units. So pretty simple and light impact on the land.
Question, what,
yeah.
if there were 9 acre lot, and you said, okay, what would you estimate the maximum number of units that could go, would it be much more?
9 acres is probably actually more like 7 units is what we're finding. So we need to, based on the soil-based lot sizing,
Yeah,
you know, we're basically doing 8 times 54,500 to get 9 acres. So does that answer your question? Not quite. I think I went around it there, not on purpose.
yeah, no, what I was wondering is if, say you really, you know, if you were in a commercial environment where you wanted to get the maximum number of units
Mhm.
possible.
You would absolutely not need
No.
9 acres. Yeah.
Or, I guess I'm asking it the opposite way, how many would you be able to build out
In 9 acres?
in the 9 acres?
That's a really, we do urban development in Portland. So a 1 acre lot is, you could do 40 units on an acre,
Yeah.
but that's an urban development.
Yeah,
So-
and stay within our zoning.
I mean, it goes back to the soil-based lot sizing. So I think the number of units is tied to the amount of land, the parcel that you create for it, right? So
No,
I think
absolutely no. I think you were given the answer if you just ignored zoning altogether, then you
Right.
put 40 acres,
Yeah.
40 units or whatever the number is.
Right.
But when you put the zoning in, he's just saying 54,000 or roughly square
the
feet.
zoning says you have to have 54,500, which is, an acre is 43,560
Right.
square feet. So you have to have 54,000 square feet and change per unit. Now, I have questions about the soil-based lot sizing requirements and frontage requirements, but we want to,
I
don't wanna
think he's
get-
asking
get
how
in-
many lots, how many, on this particular site, which would be 8 units. 8, I think is the
on
maximum.
lot 2,
on
as
that site.
according to the subdivision plan,
8.
it would be, the maximum would be 8.
You can't do
Yeah.
more than 8.
It's a cluster development, right?
Now, if we, it's tricky in the zoning, because if we do a cluster development, or this would be a multifamily development, right? Which carries the same zoning requirements, dimensional standards as a cluster, single-family development, interestingly. Which for one, biggest hurdle is the frontage. So right off the bat, the multifamily dimensional requirement requires 200 feet of frontage. So there's 2 different ways to interpret that in my mind. The way that I've read it is if you create a subdivision like we're doing, we have 480 feet of frontage on Route 16 plus Green Hill Road frontage. In order to create multifamily housing on this lot, regardless of the internal lot lines that might be created, you need a minimum of 200 linear feet of frontage. Some might interpret that to mean if we're creating 3 lots, then that lot frontage that contains the multifamily is required to be 200 feet. In which case, that's gonna be really tough to get. Where maybe if we read the letter of the law, we might be 20 feet short.
And we would require a reduced frontage
If there's cluster, it's 150.
if there's affordable.
Right.
So-
If it's
Yeah.
affordable, we we shrink it down to, I think, 1.25.
150, I think, but I'd love to be wrong.
I
Yeah, so.
forgot what we arrived at.
And so the 150 for Mike here, is that then, is the 50 over there added to it?
No, so the way I have this drawn is 150, 150, 150. Or, sorry, it'd be 150, 150, 180. To get 480 total. So the way I read so there's a couple different avenues that I'd like to get answers on from the board, you know, which direction we should go, or maybe this doesn't work at all, but One is there an am I interpreting the code correctly with my first interpretation that in order to create any multifamily housing on this lot, regardless of the subdivision that's created, we just need 200 feet as a frontage is just the minimum threshold to do multifamily housing, period.
I thought we required less.
Because we don't, I guess for practical purposes, we don't need all that frontage. There's really no practical
Single lot,
purpose for it.
150.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember you doing that.
Clusters for as little as 150.
This is multifamily, you're saying, not
This-
cluster.
This would be technically multifamily, which I think is the same
What's the
provision
difference?
as,
It's all, both of them are in section
and I think it's 150 is incentive or whatever it's, however it's worded.
Yeah, what we're looking at is in the affordable housing incentive section 10.6.3.1 allows for having as little as 50 foot of frontage along the state or town highway, as long as it's on a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 class road,
Mm-hmm.
no class 6.
That's for affordable housing, right? If it's
Yes.
not,
Yes.
so it'd be deed restricted, but
Right.
but if we're not doing
Yes, if you're
affordable
not,
deed
if you're not
restricted,
restricting,
yeah.
it's for, that's the higher amount.
So it's a longer answer for us. If we are forced to make these deed restricted, quote unquote, capital A affordable or workforce units, we just have to go back and talk to Mike and see if he's okay with deed restricting the units and going through that kind of legal process. And, you have to file some paperwork with the state and probably the town attorney
And this board cannot, we can't offer any variance on frontage. This is not within our.
well, that was my question, is whether that's, because there's two things. So the way that the code is written on frontage, it sounds like it's a threshold. Like if your parcel in which you're creating a multifamily use has at least 200 feet, which we have 480 total, then you are allowed to
Are
create
you
multifamily
planning
housing.
on doing an actual subdivision into these 3 lots?
No, there would be no, what you're seeing is the lot divisions that we're proposing.
So there would
So
be
no,
these three, 1, 2, 3 lots?
You
Yep.
have 3 lots, so you have to do a subdivision, then they would each would be separate ownership. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
In that case, then you would have, your lot 2 would have to have, it's in
the more restrictive, 200 feet.
no, it's not in the rural residential.
In
That one.
commercial?
It's in the commercial, and so that, it would only be 150 feet.
Because it's in the village district.
Right.
Okay. So multifamily in the village district, frontage is 150 feet. Okay.
How about,
Anyone that's actually not-
road, driveway,
It could be any.
if you're doing multi-units, as I understand it, you can have 2 dwelling units on a driveway.
Under the definition of driveway, right? Yep.
Beyond that, you have to do a town spec road.
Mm.
That's my understanding. I mean,
Look to the town engineer on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I
wonder if the road.
I guess I need to look in the regulations, I'm not familiar to see, I mean, a lot of times if you can have multifamily, you can have more than 2 units on a multifamily one, and I just, I have to pull the zoning ordinance
Okay,
to
so
see.
driveway.
Allow this.
I mean, clearly, if it was 2 single-family houses, you know, a traditional one, it's limited to 2 driveway. But I would just
that right of
want to
way.
see in this multifamily if that applies here.
And I wonder if, do you have any thought if that road meets town spec as it exists?
No.
Okay. So that's, I would guess that's,
I mean, certainly construction-wise it does, alignment-wise,
So-
It probably does not as well.
We, just for background too, we've been going back and
Okay,
forth with
if you
the,
want the definition of driveway, means an area located on a lot, tract, or parcel of land and built for access to a garage or off-street parking space serving not more than 2 dwellings, except in the case of cluster single-family development or subdivision and multifamily residential developments in which up to 4 dwelling units may be served by a driveway.
There we go.
so that allows us up to 4, yeah.
Okay.
So it's, I mean, it's a, sounds like it's a pretty good expense to bring the road up to town spec. So
Yes.
it'd be a question for Mike if he were willing to improve the road to town spec for 4 more units. Just also, we have been in touch with the state, and we have a preliminary approval for our driveways for site distance on Route 16. They did review both. They need to review the final subdivision plans to give us the final approval, but, so in
So
terms
you
of
have
sight lines.
approval for a driveway on lot 3 and 1 driveway on lot 2?
Correct, yeah. It's not a full approval, it's a preliminary review
Okay.
and approval. And so I think the only other thing to add is, I may have a couple final questions, but I think everyone knows where this is in the town, pretty familiar. So the benefit of this is, the site is already cleared, utilities are in, the driveway is in, the access is there. And you essentially won't see it. Like, I was gonna make a joke that this is a photo simulation rendering of the housing in place, because you won't see it. That was a bad joke.
I like the joke,
Okay, thank you.
yes,
You appreciate that?
yes,
Okay.
immensely.
So your unit would be on lot 3, is my guess.
Our goal is to build a small home on lot 3 so that you can take 2 more vehicles off Route 16, we can walk to our studio next door. Yep. And really, that's in perfect alignment with Mike's goal, which is to put housing for his workers up on this lot so they can use the ski trail to go to the Red Fox or take 4 to 8 more cars off Route 16. So it's something that we fundamentally believe in, reducing traffic, walkability, and housing. So
By utilities in place, you meant power and water?
power, water, and there's a giant septic field over there
That's what I
that we think we can tie
meant.
into.
And the water is a precinct, Jackson precinct?
Yep, it's a precinct water, yep.
And for the multifamily, you have enough, you set it so that there's enough open space to meet that requirement?
The common open space.
Yeah.
We have, so we were kind of hoping to do this as a traditional or conventional subdivision first, just to keep it simple. If we need to, I guess if we do cluster or multifamily, we can still do the lot divisions. You're just essentially saying, you're like, this is a question for you all. So essentially what we're committing to, if we call this a cluster or multifamily development, is we're almost in a way like calling everything outside the building common open space.
So speed,
It's accessible to the public and people within the community.
so it'll be a PUD? Would this be a PUD?
I don't think it changes the classification of the development. Like, we wouldn't be condominiumizing the
Right.
units because Mike would still own the lot, right? And the buildings on the lot.
Gotcha.
But the way that I read the ordinance is that common open space requirement, which would only be 25%, I think, if we do workforce, it's just basically agreeing that all lands outside the building is for common use, which there's already a ski trail on the property, so it's essentially providing that today. And if we had a concept, actually, I never got to the fun stuff, but
And not necessarily all, the good, you'd have to just break it down into pieces, some of which would be common, some which could be elsewise.
yeah, and it wasn't clear in the ordinance, I guess, how to designate that, or if it needs to, but maybe it's written into the deed, or,
Once it's designated, what you can do on that land is limited in terms of like construction or, that kind
Okay.
of thing. And
Yeah.
so that's why it needs to be set in place. It can be the land around the buildings if the buildings aren't you know.
If you're basically committing to not
But you're
expanding
saying
your.
this land right here is common land and therefore I cannot build,
Mhm.
you know.
I think Mike would probably be fine with that, but it's something that we need to talk about.
So for example, there could be what's considered open space, which you never have a build on or anything, you can't develop it in any way, even for the community.
Mhm.
That's, exists on a lot, whereas common land can have, like if you decide that you want to put a basketball court up or something like that.
Yeah, like a common community amenity or.
Right,
Yeah.
that would be.
Pickleball court.
Yeah,
What about like the existing ski trail
yeah, I mean,
that,
yeah.
that Mike has provided for the towns and amenity with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no requirement to build an amenity, right? You're just setting aside.
No,
land that-
it's
Yeah.
it's simply stating that you want to set aside areas specifically for particular use or potential future use, as opposed to one that, you can't do anything with. And some of the requirements for building out, particularly the condominiums, depending on size, you have a requirement to have set aside space.
Right, which makes sense because when you're creating a condo, you're basically setting the lot lines after building, right?
And that's part of the process of putting together the
Yeah.
fabric of the.
Mike's on vacation, that's why he's not here tonight, but I'll talk to him about some of these things. I just wanted to point out, so one other fun idea we have is where that old house is today, kind of playing into this common open space conversation, maybe there's opportunity to create a new ski loop up and around that knoll, and there's really great views of the golf course in the town up there, and maybe we could utilize that old pad site for.
And all that would be great.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure you knew that you're sort of saying, this is what it's gonna be for, and therefore we
Can't build on
we
it.
can't develop it
Yeah.
Right.
some other way down the road if we
Yeah.
decide to.
Yeah, I don't think Mike ever really had any real plans. I mean, I think at one point he was talking about, some other development opportunity here, but that was in the past, and I think really his intent is just to provide some, simple housing for people who work with restaurants. Pretty
Tea house would be nice.
tea house.
Yeah,
Yeah. Cool.
yeah, it was really
If it's
serendipitous.
got the view, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was really,
Okay.
it's been very serendipitous, just us being like, hey, can we like put a little house right there and buy a lot? And he's like, oh, I don't know, but you know what, I've always wanted to do this, so maybe if you'll do this, like help me to do this. So it's just kind of, the timing has worked and,
So are you lot 3? Is that?
Yes.
That would be
Yeah.
your lot, and
Yeah.
the other two would be
Yeah, correct.
So the road / driveway is a big expense, right? I mean, you're probably $400 a foot or more, or something like that.
Yep.
To build that, right? I
Yeah.
don't know what the length is there, and then you need to designate a right of way.
Right.
The right of way, so that takes part of your land away,
So
so
I
your
think
lot
it's
size
50
gets
feet.
smaller.
Yeah.
And you need a cul-de-sac turnaround or a hammerhead or something, that looks like you have a hammerhead on that, not where they want for the road standards, but that would be a turnaround, so. I think that's kind of like seems to me like that's
that
it seems like you could, try, go to zoning board and make the claim for more than 4 units if you, because that would be my take on it. And then, but give them something that, more than just a driveway, give them something that'll give them access that
Mm-hmm.
fire chief's happy and those guys are happy,
Mhm.
and give it a shot, I don't know what they would say.
Yeah.
It seems like everybody's in favor of affordable housing or workforce housing, so that would probably help your argument a bunch too.
Yeah, I think building the town spec road is, I would guess Mike's response would be, that might make the housing a lot less affordable.
Right.
yeah, you might
Right.
not want to
That's
do
always,
that.
Or
Yeah.
is it necessary to build the road as opposed to just allow the space for it?
like to plat the right of way, basically.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, normally the way it works is you either build it or you provide a bond for the value of the construction.
'Cause I was just
So
thinking,
potentially
I was
you
just
could
thinking-
not build it, but you're gonna have a bond going.
I was
for
thinking
every
visually
bond.
how it looked after you build it, town spec road as opposed to just have the right of way for it. Visually it would look better than not to have a town spec, wide road.
Right, I mean, in this case, you're 18 or 20 feet of pavement, and our fire line is 20 feet, so that's pretty much what you have just for a fire truck. There's a bit of a curve there, so it's probably not gonna give too much of that. Usually if you're up to like 5 units, it's not paved, but once you're over 5, in and out, it becomes a paved road in addition to gravel and those things, so it definitely adds cost.
Mhm.
You come up with something creative and go to the zoning board. I mean, I think the project overall, to me, sounds like something that the town would be pretty receptive to,
Yeah,
but,
What
we just
do
gotta
you-
make it work.
Can you be a little more specific? What do you mean, come up with some, Nick, are you following?
Yeah, I get,
Okay, he's got it.
yeah. I think it's, you know, I think someone mentioned it's kind of more attractive if we could keep it as it is today. Right. I don't think anyone necessarily wants to like pave a wider road there and like do more grading and rip out trees and, it's a pretty, I think it's a pretty adequate road. It doesn't exceed 10%. There's enough space for 2 vehicles to pass and the road flattens out the bottom. And DOT has looked at it and they seem okay with it. So if there's any way around the town spec road requirement,
Again, we don't, we
There's
can,
no-
we can
there's no
actually
waiver
vary, we can
mechanism.
vary the pitch of the road for a short amount of distance, but I think that's the only thing we are allowed to do.
Kevin,
And is it
the
10
river be a
units or
water
none?
source for the fire suppression?
what's that?
Is it 10 units or none?
Would the river
In
be
other
a
words, could
water
Mike
source
sell
for
for 4
fire
units?
suppression?
and kinda get back on?
Jay wanted the fire hydrant.
It's a good question.
And then upgrade the road at a later point for stage 2.
So he wouldn't have to have a fire pump?
That's a good idea.
Support.
No,
If-
since the
if
water
that
runs
were-
through there, he wants a fire
If we could
hydrant.
size the lot, you know, adequately to meet zoning requirements to eventually contain up to 10 units or whatever Mike's full build-up wants to be, and phase into it and just build 4, you know, keep the road as is, keep it really simple, and then come back, improve the road in order to build the additional units. I think that
That
might
might be an approach,
be
yeah.
a good approach, yeah. Good idea.
You just wanna get Jay and Kevin to sign off on the driveway to make sure they can get their emergency vehicles in there, 'cause that's somewhat regardless of whether it's a road or not, they still have to,
Yep,
they still wanna make sure they can get there.
yep.
And then Kevin, did I just hear you say Jay wants a fire hydrant up?
Yeah, I mentioned
In
this
addition
to,
to
I
the
mentioned
bond.
this to him, so
Yeah,
there's.
we've been talking to Jay.
Yeah,
too,
there's,
yeah.
because the water line's right there, so you tap right off the line.
What's that, what kind of work is it? I don't know what's required.
$2,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a 10-inch HDPE water line there that's got all sorts of water, so
Yeah.
it's just a matter of, and then I think,
It's just like a plastic pipe tap and some,
you know, it'll be a regular, you know, ductile iron hydrant, but it will
Okay.
tap to the plastic water line, the HDPE water lines under the road.
okay,
Well, from town.
not agreed.
Yeah,
Right.
town
There
water
was,
right through
I mean, I'd have to look at the plan, but we left, I think, I mean, I was working with the Jackson Water Precinct, helped them through the construction phase of the water line, and we left in some places some like taps, so future things could be added,
Mhm.
so there might just be a tap, or basically a T there that you just need to connect onto, and it would be quite
Okay.
workable.
Yeah, Bruce, since you worked on that, would any of this process actually help the water district in terms of access, or is it just it wouldn't do anything? I'm just trying to think through what the benefit might be to the water district if this were done.
Yeah, I don't mean, it's a cross-country water line, so there's limited access, but usually there's not too much you're too worried about on a cross-country water line, because you don't have people digging by it, or those other things.
I mean, this portion where the water line runs, we have it essentially running under the parking there.
Yeah.
So that's another reason, you know, ideally not to pave it, is that if it's gravel, it's easier to dig up and replace.
I'm just trying to think through the pluses and minuses.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the plus would be that it would be maintained, you know, indefinitely as long as the housing is there, that, you know, be cleared and free of vegetation and maintained, so might be one plus.
You show 4 buildings here, now that would then be, each one would be 2 units?
That's the idea, yeah, and this is
That
just
would be
very cartoon.
Two
preliminary.
one-bedroom units, yeah. Each would be one bedroom.
That was the other part of the deed, you know, the affordable housing requirement is that you can only do up to 20% one bedroom, and Mike initially expressed interest in building all one bedrooms, so I think it's minor. I think we just have to ask him, like, are you okay with building a couple one bedrooms and a couple two bedrooms, you know?
What's the duration of the deed restriction for affordable housing? Is that indefinitely, or is there a certain number of years?
It has no definite.
Conway has 20 years, so they're,
Yeah, we didn't put it in the,
I would
for
just,
sunset.
Kevin thinks it's forever.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing anything on the time limit.
There's no,
No.
there's no
I
sunset
know.
on ours, no.
It was,
That would
I could be wrong, but.
and the deed restriction is that it just has to remain a rental unit and it's certain size limitations, is that what it is?
And to a certain
Size.
income level.
And
It's like
There's an income level in
the,
Yeah,
yep,
Yeah, there's a definition of it right in the.
80% AMI,
yep.
I think, for single family,
Something like
up to 100% for
I've not seen any
certain
of those
household
projects.
sizes.
It's right there.
Yeah.
No, they haven't
Yeah.
yet.
You'd be our very first affordable
right.
housing
Yeah.
That's right. The
project.
first time the ordinance.
We're trying to make the paper, Jackson, did affordable housing before.
You're beating the odds.
Conway's ones just say 20 years deed rental unit for 20 years, and that they have to be less than like 1,000 square feet or something like that. They do not put any income levels on it just because they don't want to monitor that. They don't want to, how are we going to monitor what the, you know, the things are?
I have a couple of
Yeah,
technical
benefit has
questions,
some too.
procedural, technical stuff.
You
We're trying to save money on consultant fees and all this stuff. Do we need a high-intensity field soil survey for this site? Or is a web soil survey what's available on GIS online?
We've always used that.
Sorry?
We've always used that, what you just described.
The GIS map.
Yeah.
High intensity?
Do we need someone to go out and do borings all over the site?
The regulations say you need the site-specific soil mapping, right, unless it's waived by the board. And so I think that's what he's asking, is this a situation where you would not require?
Would you be comfortable with us just using the web soil survey for this property?
It has to do with the size of the lot. And, you know, if you get a smaller lot that, well, maybe it is big enough, maybe not, then you want a high intensity. But if it's a case of, like your lot one with one unit on it, no, that
Yeah, we're not gonna do that.
you wouldn't.
So
So
for the,
usually what you would do is a high intensity soil survey on the area that's going to be developed. If there is some question as to whether the soils can support the number of units that you request.
okay.
So if you're right on the margin of what it can support.
We were told that because it's a complex in soils, we might need a high intensity soil survey, but
True.
there's also a huge septic system on the,
Well,
Property
that's the other question, you'd be tapping into the existing septic.
that's a goal, we haven't gotten a clear answer on whether that's.
Do you know what the capacity of that septic system?
It's way over capacity. I mean, it's underutilized right now. And Mike has the real-time data to show that it's been sized for like a hotel, essentially, and he doesn't use all the capacity, so.
That kind of,
I'm not as familiar with the engineering of it, but it would seem that the soils process that we're looking at is, has to do with whether or not we can deal with a septic, is it not?
That's the underlying basis for all of the different soils categories.
So if they were to say, geez, you know, this is definitely gonna be engineered, so use an existing septic system, would we be considering waiving
and doesn't the
that?
state,
I would say we would
doesn't the state
consider
define
all
that?
the
The state's
facts.
the permitting.
Didn't hear what you said.
Isn't the state inspection the permitting for the state approves all septic systems, right?
Well, first the designer, and then it goes to Burr.
Yeah.
Burr looks at it and says, you know, it's okay, and then sends it down.
Yeah,
If
but it's
not,
an
they send it
existing,
back.
an existing system.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there should be all data somewhere on that. I don't know how many gallons per day.
So just one technical question, so the leach field is on the same lot that you would be,
On the multifamily lot, yeah.
so that,
We checked the nitrate setbacks. if we were-
right, so
So
there would have to be some sort of easement there, because
Mhm.
otherwise you'd have to count the lot loading from the
We,
restaurant as well.
we've talked about that with the surveyor, and this is what we're trying to define the surveyor scope too, part of this conversation. So we have a map of the nitrate setbacks of that field, and we understand that we'd have to record some easements, which Mike would be basically,
I'm not referring to nitrate,
oh, not the nitrate.
I'm referring to
Lot
lot loading,
Yeah,
right?
is that not the same?
Because you have you're putting the sewage load from the restaurant into
Yeah.
that same lot, so.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to meet the lot capacity, which is a limitation on how much you can put into a soil per acre,
Yeah,
you need to have the capacity for those 8 units plus the other ones, so you have to make sure that the lot that it's coming out of has the capacity for those, essentially for those,
so we have
for
to
the
treat,
septic system, or you need to have a lot capacity easement from one lot to the next to say that, okay, we're gonna steal X number of gallons per day of lot capacity from whatever lot the Red Fox is on, or Mike's lot, or one of those other ones.
I think that would probably be the preferred avenue. So what's the, how do we do that? Is it-
You're gonna draw an easement like you would for a physical easement, but it's
Sur-
just, it's just
surveyor,
gonna, just,
well,
what's that? No, I mean, a lawyer's gonna, it's just gonna be basically verbiage that a lawyer's
Okay.
gonna draw, so.
Okay.
The answer to your question, we can't answer your question.
that's fine. Okay, that's good. I had-
I don't think we're technically capable of answering your question
Neither am I.
effectively.
So that's okay.
We don't have the expertise or ability to say, yeah, we think you ought to do this, and then, again, you shouldn't rely on anything we say tonight.
Yep. No, this is great.
We sound like we know what we're talking about.
I have
Except
one, I have,
when we read off from the zoning ordinance, that's what you have to go by.
right.
And that's what our charge is to make sure that.
The lot frontage is the biggest one. So if we're comfortable, with the direction that the multifamily lot can have 150 feet of lot frontage, that gives us some direction.
It's not, it's not really because it's multifamily though, it's the.
It's because
commercial
in the village district,
village
that's it.
district.
That's just the village district,
The actual frontage is in the village district.
and that applies to multifamily as well.
Applies to.
It's just, so the lot size for the zone district overrides any, okay. Wetland delineation, do we need a full wetland delineation for the 30 acres?
Do you
Or
have
is it
one?
just in the areas? I think the only wet areas that I can tell are down towards our building in here.
But yeah, we would need something saying either there are no wetlands or here they are.
Yep. Okay.
Could tell from your soils.
And if we delineate wetlands, if we do that just within the areas that we're considering development, is that suitable rather than looking at the entire 30 acres?
I mean, I would certainly pull up the subdivision application
Yep,
and go through that, because that'll tell you exactly what needs to be
yep,
on the plat.
okay.
On the surface, my kind of gut reaction is that certainly on the 8 acre lot, that you would want to have that whole lot delineated, because that's going to take away from your lot capacity if it's wetland.
Mhm.
But on the other lot, as Sarah was saying, if a lot's just way, way oversized, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It may
It
not be
makes me wonder
worthwhile to map the whole lot, right?
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if we should just plan on upsizing lot 2 anyway, for that purpose, to account for some wetland or area that needs to be taken out of that calculation, even though we're
I think
not.
what you have to do first is find out what is the capacity of the septic field, what has it been built, and then take out the capacity of the restaurant and see what you have left as to how many dwelling units it would support. I mean,
Yep.
1 bedroom or 2 bedroom or how many. That's just a matter of calculation.
Okay. Okay,
That'd be a start.
Good, yeah, it's been a long start, but that's good.
I think a fair amount of that's in actual wetlands is in map. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Rick Howard's already mapped it.
We'll talk after.
Well, thank you so much for your
A
time.
little longer than 15 minutes. That's okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Great presentation, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's like a
I mean, you did have large napkin, I mean, you know.
Yeah. Do you wanna keep any of this? You can keep the 11 by 17, that would be us.
And what's your daughter's name?
Yes. Yeah.
She's Chan.
Mia Aston.
Yes.
Way to go.
Great.
So thank you all.
Thank you. Nice to meet
Thank you.
everybody. Wish us luck.
Good luck on your project.
So, one question in parting too, procedurally, can we come right back if we were to get all of our drawings in order and, check, go down our checklist, can we come right back for final subdivision review, in theory?
Yeah,
I think it's gonna take 2 months probably.
Yeah, I sent
Your
Kate,
notice- yeah, your
when I
notice
sent you the
saying-
kind of timeline requirements.
Yeah, yeah.
Those now.
Okay,
Alright,
got it. Yeah, we'll get our notices out.
Yeah.
to get
We're
our-
eager.
And also, if there's something that, makes sense, but we can't, vary, there is always the ZBA.
Yeah.
They can make variances.
Yeah. That extra 30 days, I feel that,
Yeah.
Well, it's also, it's a lot of investment, to then gamble
On the board.
right away to do it once. Yeah, there's,
We're missing one
obviously
son.
put some of our money after
Get your stuff done.
so,
On the other hand, the other lot is the one
I
that
saw his name.
you want to move forward on without thinking about the other.
He's Jerry.
with single lot.
And that other stuff there through the book. and-
Yeah.
and
Seriously,
and-
you're trying to get,
All that stuff's fine.
get a picture of square feet to live in.
No.
Yeah.
You might want to think about moving
Town
that.
Jackson.
Yes.
Or
Leslie.
just simply because of the development time.
As in what would be the way to do
That was in my
that?
office
Just a lot
last
So
adjustment?
There was only 4 of them.
But subdivision every single lot?
They'll be doing it anyhow, it's just
I was
doing
impressed.
it sooner than later.
I still,
And that would make it quick.
Can we piggyback right on that with Mike's subdivision?
Oh, I do too.
that I just,
They're also separate
well, because I
subdivisions.
put them right in my
One.
list.
Yes, Mike can put together
Sign
ours,
something.
and then keep working on his.
Yeah, I'm wondering like, we do our ours and then be fair to Mike to go back, like,
None of them are dependent.
Fortunately.
Okay.
So all of them can be done.
Ownership.
I couldn't live without
My
my
owns all your lot 1, I don't know 2 lot 3, but
Yeah.
then still die. And you own
Just 87, yeah, right there.
just that.
Yep. It extended that, the lot extended over that.
Oh, we already had that lot.
You own
Yeah.
that.
Right.
The one,
You own this lot.
yes,
So you either raise your bar that might not like it.
yeah, we're the ones that are gonna complain about the people building the house.
Exactly.
Lots have to be based on four
Yeah.
That's why they're doing it.
We
I mean,
look
there
at-
is a separate cost for
It
doing
was just
multiple subdivision.
1 or 2 bed.
uh,
And then a lot
If you,
size
if you did them in a serial fashion,
2 bed.
one and another,
Mhm.
there's there'd be an additional cost for this.
Yeah, it's a 2 applications. fees, right? We're trying to be fair to Mike, and we're, I mean, he's been very
Right, no,
fair.
but just in terms of your own thinking and process and
Yeah.
timing,
Yeah,
it's just something.
thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again.
Thank
There, we just.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice job.
Thanks. Get a copy.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Did you open the sign in?
I did.
Okay, great.
You want the signing list?
No, you can leave it there. I just want to make sure.
Thanks, Burr.
Thanks.
It was a little.
Get some short-term rental.
We have 2 of them. 2 of them should be quick. First one, okay, Keller is a 3-bedroom tax card and building permit. They advertise for a 3-bedroom, sleeping 6, so it meets all of the standard requirements for it.
Question of curiosity, where's Chipper Point?
Mm.
13A.
It's in the
Is
Wentworth.
that- is that
It's
Wentworth?
it's one of those little roads off of Wentworth
So
Hall,
this
I
is
believe.
Wentworth.
It's one of those condos over there, somewhere.
Okay.
It's on the right.
Yep.
I can picture it.
That's all right.
Yeah, there's 2 units up there.
Would this happen to be one of the ones that might have an egress issue, or we don't know that?
I think they're on the list to change out one window. The owner, believe it or not, 2 years ago, wasn't renting or anything, but replaced all the windows.
Yep.
Window for window. But at that time, they should have done those bedroom windows, and there's only one that needs to be replaced. So they are getting a building permit or have one.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
thank you. All right, so
Any issues?
we have a motion to accept the application.
Second.
And who's first, I'm sorry? You said?
Oh, I thought
You
you
said
said you had a
second.
motion.
No,
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We have a
Sorry.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next.
The next one, there's no building permit on file or septic. Tax card says 3 bedrooms. They are advertising 4 bedrooms, sleeping 7. So their advertisement is wrong, but their sleeping unit is correct according to the tax card. So,
Have we asked any to change their advertising in the past?
Yeah.
Situation.
yeah, this is a new one, so this is a new application and a new structure. So we would make a comment here to the board that they would have to comment to the people that they would have to change the ad.
For new kids, if we observe anything, our process is such that if we observe something and they don't include something, we can not accept the application because they fail to meet a minimum requirement. But if the application is complete but is defective, that is, we perceive that there's a problem with egress, or if there's a problem with the ad, or they say they've got 6 bedrooms and they have septic for 2. We still have a requirement to accept the application, but we can do so with comments. It is up to the Board of Selectmen, then we're actually approving or not approving the application to make the decision as to whether or not they will approve a permit. And they would cite any comments we might make or any other information they may obtain to determine whether or not they approve or not. So that's our process. We started out the other way where if we knew something, we'd say, we're not gonna accept the application. We found that was a defective process. And it didn't meet the due process requirements. So if we see something, we say something, but we push it on. If it doesn't meet minimum requirements to even accept the application, we push it back to the office and say, hey, they didn't, there's no signed affidavit as of good, for example. Or the affidavit was signed, but it wasn't notarized. Those would be defective applications, and those would be ones we could reject and not accept. So that's how it works. And having said that, we have here a situation where we can accept the application, but we have to do so with comments in order for the Board of Selectmen to make a determination as to what they want to do. So,
Because they're the enforcement arm.
pardon?
Because they're the enforcement arm.
Exactly, we have no enforcement arms or hands. So, do I have a motion to accept the application?
One second, notice that the esthetician is not notarized. The term of conditional use application is,
You have nothing?
okay. That's not,
That's not, I don't think we can accept that.
no.
So, do I have a motion to not accept?
So moved.
Second?
Yeah.
I have a motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay.
And the other note here is for a compliance discussion, and at the Board of Selectmen meeting on Tuesday, the selectmen have now sent out letters to anybody who's in the residential district who came on board after the zoning ordinance was in place. For the limit of 30, they are sending out a requirement that those folks substantiate that they have not rented more than 30 times in a year. I don't believe it's retroactive. I believe it's simply for this current year and going forward. So they've begun to implement that process, which I think we thought they should have done probably a couple of years ago, because that was what the intention was. But I think we only have like 4 properties that currently, at least that's what I heard, maybe more, but there's somewhere between 4 and 10 properties that fit into that category.
That we suspect to be rented more than 30 times.
No, that are possible to have a 30 limit on them.
That's all we have in residential?
Well, most of the ones we had were pre, and are not subject to the 30.
You're after the zoning, okay.
Right. We don't require it of the earlier ones, so, anyway, that's what's going on. There's no movement on whether or not they're still going to, other than by word of mouth, on any folks who are currently short-term rental owners who don't have permits. That's where we stand on compliance and enforcement. Capital improvement plan. We used up a bit of our time listening. I thought it was really great to take the time to these folks on their process. It was good to see somebody's interested in building some
It was a great presentation, too.
yeah, and just anything to put out properties that are going to fit income levels that are within the median or less. That's great. Capital improvement plan. We are authorized, because we did get a vote at the town meeting. Thank you, Jerry, by the way, for allowing me to introduce Article 11. And the town body did agree to have a capital improvement program. Our primary deliverable in the program is to create a capital improvement plan. But one of the things I'd like to talk about tonight is we're not going to get into any detail, but I'd like to make sure we all agree on what our basic goal will be, what our objectives are, and some of the ways we might go about achieving them. I think I sent out to everyone what a capital improvement program is supposed to do. I sent a thing from the New Hampshire Municipal Association. Most of you read that or didn't read it. If you didn't get a copy, you didn't get a
I didn't
copy,
see it.
but somebody I think you know did. I can also send it again, if you like. But bottom line, the intention is to create a program which encompasses what we expect our capital outlays are going to be for the next, it says in that minimum 6-year perspective. But usually it's within a 6 to 10 year perspective that we should be looking at. We have something in place already, which I consider to be a starting point, which is we have a schedule for current capital purchases, not necessarily capital improvements. So for example, if we're looking to replace a patrol car, or we're going to replace a fire engine, we have schedules in place for reserving for those. So we have a bit of a capital reserve program, but we don't really have a capital improvement program in place. And that is to take a look, what are the town's capital needs over a period of 7 to 10 years? And understand, how much money are we going to need to spend during that time? What are our priorities? How might we pay for it? And think that through. And I think for me, that's the primary objective, is that we need to first identify how much money do we really need to spend? And not necessarily just to keep things together, but to actually grow and develop over the period of 7 to 10 years. I mean, the things that are going, most of what we've been looking at previously is maintenance stuff. I think folks who have been doing this for a long time, it looks like a maintenance schedule. The kind of thing you might do when you're looking at your house and saying, well, yeah, I know I'm going to need to replace the boiler in 3 years, so I better put some money aside. Or I need to replace my car, I want to pay cash for it, I better, have a 5-year depreciation for that and have the money available at the end of the 5 years. That's what it looks like. It doesn't address either any major funding, either for the school, library, fire station, or any other facility, transfer station, roads. I mean, we really don't have a good road plan in place right now that I can see. I mean, I'm just looking at it, and I don't really see, probably, when we looked at it from, and we have a few folks who are on the facilities committee here. And when we looked at that stuff, we should benefit from the facilities committee stuff, but it really, it's just a starting.
It was pretty much a dream sheet.
Well,
I didn't get down to the.
We didn't get down to the nuts and bolts of things, and it's like, we may talk about affordable housing as part of our master plan, but that's not the capital improvement plan.
Maybe the land that we buy for affordable housing.
Exactly. Are we good?
Land trust.
Are we going to establish a land trust and do that? I mean, you have to talk through all those different things that were. Some might be pie in the sky. Some of them may be, do we really need a new roof on some building in 3 years? I'd like to build on what the facilities committee did as much as we can, but I think we have a much harder road to travel in order to get our work accomplished. And I'd like to open up the conversation so I'm not just talking about what things you feel we ought to be doing and what things we ought not to be doing as part of the process, and who we need to get involved. The other critical part is, how will we as a group do this? Will we do anything in subcommittees? Will we do it always as a large group? Will we do some of both where we have assigned 2-3 people to work on something and then bring it back to the committee? I don't know. I'm just throwing things out here now. How do we want to work effectively? The other thing is timing. If we're going to present this, what kind of timing might we think about? Right now, it's already April, and if we're trying to do something for a town meeting next March, we're already behind the 8 ball, because what we have to get done needs to get done for that process by December, which that gives us 7 more meetings before we can go to it's not a lot. You know, it really isn't a lot. So we need to look at our time window and say, is this going to be something we're going to try to push for to try to get done for town meeting next year, or is it something we can look towards a broader window? I'm going to throw this open to just discussion, and hopefully we'll come up with a few answers to those things, and if not, we'll push it on to the conversation next month.
I think you're pointing out the need for a subcommittee. Because if you leave it to the whole committee to do it, it's gonna only fit into the time left over after the regular things that have to happen at every meeting. Like this, for example. I mean, you set aside 15 minutes for this person, and they did a great presentation, but it also took 35 or however minutes it was. And a subcommittee, there isn't that distraction. There isn't that priority settlement. You've got something to do, and you do it.
But you still have to notice for public
Yeah,
and in committee meetings.
sure.
I would recommend that we do it as a group, but it doesn't have to be every other week. You could schedule work sessions, as long as we notice them, we'd meet the public, you know, the disclosure requirement. But I think that there's a benefit in us working together rather than having separate groups come in. I also like your timeline situation where I agree that there's something that we should, doesn't mean that our work is done when we report to the town. But we could certainly pick some key, like the fire station, for example, like what we could do for the fire station. The roads, that we could pick, like, what could we accomplish to report to the selectmen by town meeting, and what couldn't we do? So we could prioritize those things that we could do. And when you asked, how are we gonna pay for it? It's the taxpayers that are gonna pay for it. The bonding is generally the way you would do it. And I think that while you couldn't come, like for the, let's use the fire station as an example, and let's use a renovation as an example as opposed to building. We don't have the ability to put out a contract to know what it will be cost for renovation. But we do have soft numbers, and we can advise, this is what it would cost the taxpayers for a 1.7 renovation on a 20-year bond. We could do the same thing with the school. If it's going to be a 2.5, it's a soft number that they put out. What that would, getting to how we're going to pay for it, we can specifically tell the selectmen, this is what a 20-year bond would cost for a 2.5. And then the roads, how much could we put into the roads on an annual basis? And then you have the unincorporated fund balance that you could also advise them to. For example, if you're going to do a 10-year improvement program on the roads, how much from the unincorporated fund balance could they take out? We have a 1.4 fund balance now, grows about 80 grand a year. So that could certainly be incorporated into any, if we wanted to. Or we could say, all right, you put 100,000, we boosted it from 65 to 95 this year. It's really going to be I mean, from what I found is that you're looking at, there's some things that cost $1 million to do. You're going to box cut roads. So those are, I think, I don't think we should work in committees, I don't think that accomplishes what you want to do. I think we should work as a group, we could schedule work meetings.
So are you asking for a separate meeting every month to do that? Because you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. To me, in my experience working in committees, the larger the group, the less they accomplish.
And that's why I suggested that we limit it to like 4 or 5 items that we can report to by town meeting. And we could continue, we don't have to discontinue the capital improvement studies. That can go on for,
Yeah, we have a variety of choices there. One of the choices would be to, and my recollection is that our requirement for notices is if we have 4 or more members attending a meeting and we do not have a requirement for notice. We can have a meeting without notice if we have 3 or fewer members.
but you're discussing town business.
We can have work sessions, and that's permissible according to the RSAs, to have work sessions that are fewer than quorum in order to have conversations, and that's what they are. They're not necessarily, they're work in progress as long as they're reported to the board meeting as to what was discussed and what the ramifications and implications are, and that is town business, and those are noticed and those are required.
I think it's no money, no votes. So you can have the work session. You can't vote any money.
Right.
You
Needs to be
can't.
more fact-finding.
Right, it's just people talking, you know, the
Right.
3 of us talking about baseball.
And maybe talking with Jay to see, because I agree, I couldn't see all 9 of us sitting in a room.
No, it's impossible.
Right,
We would never do anything.
and having notice requirements and quorum requirements will be difficult. We have difficulty getting I mean, this is great thing.
This is the first meeting though in about
Well,
6.
if we're not
Where
voting,
everybody's
we
been.
wouldn't need a quorum.
Right.
Right.
Well, I
And if it
find
was a
that
big
bad.
group, that wouldn't, you could still have, you know,
If
a
it's
couple
if it's a
people.
notice meeting, you have to have a quorum or you have to cancel the
And
meeting,
what would the committees
If
be
there's
charged
no
for?
voting.
even if there's no
Well,
vote,
that's,
yes,
what I
sir.
think we have to pick, oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
But I think pretty soon we should pick what areas are we gonna deal with? Okay, the school, the fire department. I have an idea of, should the town get involved in any solar? In other words, on town property, should, because I can do that on my own as far as contacting the solar installers and report back, which I'm happy to do. But should I waste my time by doing it and it's really not relevant? Or is that one area that we, want to
Yeah.
deal with? But we should pick out our areas. So, you know,
Well,
it's not too
can we
scattershot.
do that now?
Yeah.
How about we try that? Let's run something up the flag and see if we can all salute it. And, you know, if there's something we can't all salute, we're gonna put those aside. But there's gotta be 3 or 4 things that we all agree on, I hope.
As far as the full group is the discussions, but you have to have information.
Yeah.
And individuals or pairs can get information, like what
But
Dick
that-
just mentioned.
That information has to come from people like the highway department,
Right.
people like the school board, people like the fire
Right, so
department.
individuals can get that information, bring it to the full board, and then the discussion would be as the full board.
And we've talked to council on this, we talked to council on this when we're doing short-term rentals. We can do that as long as we don't have more than 3 individuals. We can have a work session. Work sessions are not subject to our right to know, they're not subject to quorum requirements, they're not subject to notice requirements, but they are subject to report back to the board, and when they are, then all those things.
There's one other subject that nobody's mentioned yet. There's been some push to have an ambulance housed in town.
Mhm.
Is that something we should look at?
I think so.
Let's begin to talk about what we can agree on. Do we need to talk about the fire station?
Yes.
Why don't we just say town buildings?
All right, okay,
That's pretty broad, but,
it is.
but it'll get us started.
To get us quick, well, anybody have any problem with town buildings?
No, to me, that's the big thing. Yes, I've heard the discussion of trying to bring an ambulance and how we're gonna do that. You know, is it part of the fire, or is it part of the police, where does it sit? There's no place for it, but there is discussion.
So town buildings also include school.
No.
School,
School is a,
Separate.
is a
A building in town.
building in town, but it's owned by the people of Jackson.
but it's funded by the people of Jackson.
And is funded, and therefore, and it is, according to the capital improvements program, an appropriate opportunity for capital improvements program to review. So I guess the question I have is, do we draw that in, do we get information on that? And the reason I ask that is because one of the concerns I have is that when we look at this, we're gonna have to be looking at and saying, is this a $3 million handle? Is this a $6 million handle? Is it a $10 million handle? I don't know. You know, it depends on whether or not you build a fire station out or not. If you build the schools out at, you know, the small footprint or some larger footprint, I don't replace the whole damn thing. I don't know.
That's
But
not what they're looking to do.
I'm not saying they do, what I'm saying is that if that were something that they were thinking about, we didn't ask the question, then we would obviously be not doing our job. Because what we're trying to identify is, how does this affect the tax base? How does this affect how we plan and schedule expense so that it doesn't hit the taxes for most folks bang all at once. And if we don't take it into consideration, I think we're remiss. So I'll ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think the school's a separate one. I mean, you can include it in all towns, but school is a separate.
That's fine. I mean, I just got it started.
You know, like the firehouse, that's a standalone. You know, there's been talk about the police. Is that being in the basement of this place? You know, is that where we want the police being in 10? I look at this for 10 years from now. I'm gonna be sitting at this table 10 years from now, hopefully. You know, what is Jackson gonna look to me in 10 years? What do I wanna see in this town? Do I wanna see the police department still in the
10
basement?
years ago.
Huh?
It looks now like it did 10 years ago.
Maybe I don't want it to look like it did 10 years ago. and 10
Well,
years
certainly
from
it
now.
doesn't look like it did 20 years ago, so.
But it's the same thing. Roads, I mean, hopefully we can all agree that the roads in this town are outside of the state roads.
All right, so we've agreed on town buildings, we've agreed that we will at least talk about schools and ask for input from the school folks. Roads?
I think Dick's suggestion of solar is,
I'd
It's
put
terrific.
solar.
it's gonna be on everybody's mind going forward.
Well, I think the town, personally, I think the town should, you know, involve themselves in solar for whatever buildings, or, and one of the ideas is go up to the, old transfer station at Malone Road and turn that into a little mini solar farm. It might work.
And what you're gonna have to find, you know, the kind of fact finding you need is, well, what about the transformers there? Can they handle the input of, solar
Absolutely,
farm?
that's what I don't want to waste
size?
time if it's a moot point, but yes, I've learned a lot, having done the solar here and at the highway park, of what the co-op put the brakes on as far as upgrading transformers and having, so the infrastructure, we will not breezed by that this time. I think it's really important to, get the real facts. And all pricing is gonna be on a time scale. We don't know. So today, yeah, 2
Maybe
million.
more or less.
5 years from now, 3, or maybe not. Who can predict?
But
Well,
solar could be incorporated into any building we're talking about. If we're gonna upgrade the fire department, the firehouse, we should put solar on that one if it's not connected to this grid already. The school, I mean, it should be the town of Jackson should be known as someone, as a town that wants to do solar, supports it, encourages it.
Whitney Center.
The Whitney is
Got
the
a huge
one
area.
town building with the perfect orientation.
Right.
I wish we could pick up the library and turn it, because it would have been appropriate.
Yeah.
If you could throw in a basement, they'd probably say yay.
Well, it's set up for geothermal. That was gonna be the big thing. I mean, the ducts are in through the foundation. And then they found out it's a crapshoot, because you don't know until you go down with, a $15,000 drill rig, drilling expense, to find out, oh, we don't have enough, energy here.
All right,
So,
what else?
You mentioned the transfer station. How much leeway do we have on that one? Because isn't that a joint,
Right, that's a joint maintenance agreement, a whole other animal.
right? I mean, we don't have a lot of say.
That's right. Well, we have equal say, but it's a joint maintenance agreement that has different, it's subject to different parameters. My recommendation would be leave that alone. It works. It's worked the last 20 years, it's gonna work the next 20 years.
actually, it's been great, I think it's been greatly improved.
Yes, it's not.
It's done a
Thanks
great
to
job.
thanks to the guys working there.
Yeah. It's convenient.
So it sounds to me like we have an easy job here. You guys only mentioned like 4 things.
So we got buildings, highway department, whether we want to deal with major road, not repair, but redo the road. In other words, grind it.
Yeah.
Box cutter is called it.
And I've been talking to the road agent a little, because one of the things is to cover the sand pile up there. The salt is in the salt shed, but now the sand pile is out. It freezes, they have to put it through a grate before they load it on the trucks. If we could put a roof over it, it would cut down one process for them. So it'll be, yes, money spent, but it'll save us money. So anyway, I've talked to him about that. I'd like to get that on the, someplace in 10 years, someplace during this next 10 years, it would be prudent to put a roof over the sand pile.
So that leaves us with town buildings, a school, a fire station, and a roof on the sand pile. Ambulance?
Well, highway.
Yeah, the highway in general.
Well, yeah, I
roads.
say just town buildings, and then roads is
The,
another.
the, the concept on ambulance, there's a myriad of problems. The biggest problem of which, and by the way, we have an agreement, a joint agreement with Bartlett for handling the ambulance now. We're just buying a new ambulance as we speak. The issue that they're having is personnel. They have a plan for, Rick's aging. They have a plan for continuing the manpower and woman power there. If we house a separate ambulance in Jackson, in an upgraded firehouse, for example, the biggest issue is who are you going to get to man it? And an ambulance is time sensitive, right? How quick can they respond? Bartlett typically responds within, what, 15 minutes or so? And not all of the personnel lives in Bartlett. They have to come to Bartlett and then to Jackson. So if we house an ambulance in Jackson, do you honestly believe that we're gonna get 12 people, or 2 people even, that are going to be EMTs, they're gonna be here 24/7 to operate that ambulance?
You can't even get to
They're
the
gonna live in
hospital.
Jackson.
Yeah, the hospital's struggling to get the same staff pool, so not sure
And
that's-
an alternative is to hire a standalone ambulance service.
That's what's happened. Action Ambulance has come up from
Right.
the Boston area. I mean, I was an ER physician, and I was their medical director forever. And that's what's happening now, is they're taking in and replacing town people.
Yes.
And then, you know, they have the responsibility of providing that.
So that's not gonna be in Jackson.
No,
It's gonna come from somewhere else.
for sure.
So why should we, no, what I'm suggesting is we eliminate the discussion on ambulance,
Okay.
because I don't see it being a possibility.
I think that we do look at the fire station. I know that some folks, when they've looked at that, have talked about housing ambulance. So I think maybe we can talk about that when we're looking at that and saying what are the real needs around that, just for any emergency
We
services.
could park it there.
Pardon?
We could park it there.
I think we could work. The concept, the conversation, I think we can park them both there.
Problem is the manpower.
Problem will continue to be manpower here, as long as we keep on getting more folks who have this color hair than others attracted to the town, and then the people who are attracted to town are folks who are not interested in the trades or not interested in being part of the kinds of services that we need as a town. I didn't hear anything from Scott though. I was expecting Scott to say something.
Listening.
You don't think we ought to be looking at any kind of capital improvements that are town funded for anything affordable housing or anything like that?
I mean, I would love to think that.
I know.
That'd be part of the discussion.
Is that part of a conversation we ought to have?
We should discuss it, yeah, just to see if it's feasible in terms of, does the town have land the town can use towards that, or is there any appetite to raise funds to purchase land? We see that incentives, zoning incentives are really not, you know, hopefully something will occur, but it doesn't match.
So that's the first part of the F. We've had.
That very first one, yeah. So really, you know, if we're gonna turn things around, the town is, I think, you know, unless we get, you know, someone like Ann Peterson that does another big development like that, the town needs to do it on its own. That would require
Capital?
capital,
Oh,
whether it's property or cash.
I mean, the problem exists up and down the entire East Coast
Oh, yeah.
and West Coast.
Yeah.
is it worth talking about though, I guess, and having a conversation around whether or not the town should be considering
Well, you're kind of talking about a quasi-public-private enterprise.
whatever. Without getting into any detail, should we talk about it?
Can we have a part of our final product that is more or less a discussion? We haven't put any figures on it, but these are things to consider for within the next 10 years.
But then it's just a concept. It's not.
Yeah, but it may be one more avenue to get the concept out there.
Ideally, I agree with you, but ideally I would like to say that, okay, you know, if you were going to set aside an objective to have 10 units of affordable housing in town built And in order to do that, we checked with our J-Home folks, and they tell us, we're gonna need seed money of $500,000 in order to make that happen. And the seed money needs to come from the tax space. Those would be more real kinds of things in terms of providing some kind of recommendations. Says, if we're gonna do some of the things we actually expect to do in town and want to see for ourselves as a town, these are the kinds of capital investments we're going to have to make. And I think of everything, we talk about capital improvements, it really are capital investments. We're making investment in Jackson and.
The taxpayers.
Yeah, and if you look at it that way, it seems a little bit easier to pay for it. It's not an expense, it's an investment.
It'd be interesting, I mean, again, just, I know this is on video, but I wonder if the people would increase their taxes for it.
Well, some of the questions I have is, how much of the handle do we actually have that we actually do have to increase taxes? And, everyone wants, I don't want the tax base to, I don't want anything to change. And it's like, well, yeah, that's really nice, except when the boiler goes out or when you.
Do you
No, I'm not
want
saying for that, I'm
this
just saying for
or
affordable
not?
housing.
Yeah,
Do you
everybody
want
talks
it,
about
pay
it.
for it.
Right,
But you don't know
I
that.
think we
until
ran
town
into
meeting.
that at the facilities, as far as the discussion.
Yeah,
If the businesses in town are all struggling with getting manpower, is there a way we could approach businesses to help contribute?
well, that's what,
Well,
But I mean, instead of,
Again,
the whole
the
town.
brunt of taxes in Jackson is paid for people who own second homes here.
yeah,
It's not the businesses.
yeah, we don't have a lot of business.
yeah, well, but,
I mean, to that point,
yeah, some big, I mean,
I've talked with Eagle Mountain House, and
Yeah.
they,
Wentworth,
they might be open to the concept of subsidizing rent,
Yeah.
for staff, or guaranteeing, covering the.
Some towns are making that a requirement, that
yeah,
when businesses grow, like
Right.
a
The
big
the
box
only
hotel,
thing,
they have to put in housing.
right,
Yeah.
gee, where does that idea come from?
right, but speaking
Where do
of,
those ideas come from? I
They
mean,
come
where do they come from? The select board or from the?
Where they really come from is forward-thinking businesses. In
Yeah.
other words, like the Market Basket, for example,
Mm-hmm.
aren't they putting in some affordable housing behind that?
Yep.
Because nobody made them do it, they recognized that.
the need.
well, they're doing it for their own best interests.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm a business owner, and the last thing that I want to get involved in is also being a landlord or
But the
Running
question was
debt.
asked, where does that come from?
Yeah.
but, yes, sometimes businesses have to do it. It should not be businesses that are.
Well, they had a jobs fair and nobody showed up. I mean, it was a problem.
But we don't have any, right, we don't have, there's no
It's just
budget.
interesting how things turn around. Hershey, Pennsylvania,
Right.
built the whole
Right.
town to
Yeah.
support his factory in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Right. So,
In Chicago, Pullman did it,
so
and
it-
Pullman Trains built the whole town.
We were at the Eagle this Sunday, and
I
it
mean,
was the subject of conversation of all the people there. No one to work.
I mean, I could build some housing and put in a couple of stores and
Yeah, I mean,
really make it work.
we
for
can
me.
talk about chicken and egg or where the horse is versus the cart, but we also have a master plan that we're gonna do in 2025, which is also going to address some of these things. And so we need to be looking at both
Mm.
this in terms of what kinds of things are we willing to fund? And I think once we go through this, we find out there are places we aren't willing to fund. When we talk about the master plan, we may look at it and say,
That's where it belongs.
gee, we weren't willing to fund that, should we include it in the master plan? Or should we include it in the master plan so we increase the willingness to fund? And it is chicken and egg. It is, to your point, I may not be here 10 years from now, but I hope the hell I am. and I hope it's a better place than right now. I don't want it to be the same. I do not want it to be the same. I want it to be better. And so if it's going to be better than it was, it takes work, and it takes investment, it takes dollars, it takes thinking, and it takes us doing our job really well to make sure we put the money in the right places and get people to put their money where their mouth is in terms of, well, I want affordable housing, or I want this, I want a new fire station, or I want the right kind of school for the kids, whatever that is, whatever your thing is that, makes everything exciting for you here. Some folks, it's leaving it the way it was 30 years ago, and I appreciate that too. But I don't think that's what we're about.
Life isn't like that.
The issue for affordable housing is in the news every day. The news yesterday was that several governors are trying to increase, affordable housing is increasing density in a given area. And we have a difficulty here because we don't have a sewage treatment plant to allow us to increase density in the flat areas of town. But governors are running up against political roadblocks because they want to increase density. And the folks that are there say, I don't want you to increase density in my neighborhood. So there's a push me, pull me going on there. And the master plan is where I think that belongs.
And for a town like Jackson to increase density to the point where it would actually drive properties values down, I think you'd have to somehow double the density or something. If we only increase density by 25%, just 25% more properties would sell at the same values that they're selling now. There's more demand than there is inventory.
You guys seem to be tapped into a lot of the communities, not just in this area, but is any of the things we're talking about, affordable housing, is there any community it's working, that we can find out what they're doing?
Well, there's an awful lot of examples, and I keep on sending copies to Scott if I read them. California is probably the number one.
I don't know if I'm
Can
gonna follow
you get us out there? On a field trip?
But they're the ones that are doing the
Yeah,
most
it was.
creative things in order to increase density, in order to increase the amount of affordable housing. But the thing that they have, we don't have, is they have a state that's interested in investing literally hundreds of millions of dollars in the process.
And they have the utilities in place.
And they do. They have a lot of the things, the infrastructure that we don't have. And so infrastructure is a big, big issue here in town. And the fact that we, God knows that we could afford or want to have a sewage plant in town.
When we could afford it, when Wentworth was being built, and I suggested that they take that same money, it actually would have been less, to put in a sewage treatment plant that would have handled the village district. And when I suggested it, it went to the colleges down south and people thought I had an eye right here.
Exactly. You're still alive and you're still in town. I'm surprised.
And you did have an eye, because you had a vision.
But I mean, I was shot down miserably.
Yes.
It wouldn't have cost the town a whole lot of money.
Right. And now I think it's probably impossible, but I don't know.
I agree, it's impossible.
That's why I was thinking local. I mean, local. Somebody's got to be, something's got to be doing something right somewhere. Maybe it's nowhere. I don't know.
Well, there's one going up in Convent right now.
Yeah.
Affordable housing, or they're under the approval process. let's
Right,
say.
and they're able to do that a lot because they do have the infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
They have the sewer and water
And they have the
services.
But I'm just talking about not just affordable housing, but any of these to tap into, I don't know. But affordable housing it is the top of mind of everyone. I mean, I don't care where you're talking, everybody's talking about it.
And the real challenge of Jackson is, we can put up an apartment building and provide some workforce housing, but what Jackson really needs is single home housing, for young
And
families.
Ann Peterson's is the best example.
And that barely qualifies, and she, you know, there is an issue.
And
where-
if you remember when that went in, there was a hue and cry about it.
There's still a bunch of people I hear from and say that terrible thing.
And then I thought it was wonderful. Anyway, for your committee thing, I volunteer for the highway. I'll talk to Gary and get a report.
All right.
And I'll talk to the school, because Jerry's on the chairman of the planning board, chairman of the school board.
All right.
Here we go.
Work on some housing projection thing.
I'll do the fire.
That's the tough one, Dave.
I like challenges.
Days in, we have a subcommittee
This one,
from,
I'm gonna volunteer him for the ambulance. He's got a background. with
Yeah.
that.
I'll volunteer for that.
all right. Well, we put some names on stuff, and then if we have somebody else who wants to join that group, limit 3. Because if you go after 3, then I've got to do all my notices and all my other processes, and I don't want to do that.
All I'm gonna do is talk to Gary and talk to Gary and Jay. because
You
Jay
can do it
was
in
the-
1s, and you can do it in
And
2s,
get some
you can
suggestions.
do it in 3s, but you can't do it in 4s.
And some soft numbers.
No,
You have the library, and you're gonna do solar right there.
Can you pass me my hat?
Yes, because when he puts
I
it all.
think it's time to put my hat on.
I can do the library.
I'm back.
All right, this is just a start.
It's your journey on the fire.
Just a start, so thank you guys.
I
Appreciate
know.
your input. And,
I think of you
So the goal would
I
be
think
for
if
these people.
every day, because
No.
10,
No,
12 years ago,
Gentlemen,
oh, we're not done yet.
well, we should be.
Well, we're trying to be.
So, library's Bill, I'm gonna start with the fire. Kathleen, you're the school.
Mhm.
Jerry, you're the highway. Dick, you're solar. So are we committing that we'll have some update for next month?
Scott's affordable.
And affordable, Scott.
Do you have any-
What's the date for next month's meeting?
11th.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to Ireland.
I think it's an early date. It's like the 9th,
Is it that early?
Well, you can't go to Ireland
No,
until you get a school
It's
done.
the
the
11th.
11th.
You can't go to
That's why I
Ireland.
told you I can't,
You're right.
I've got surgery.
May 11th is the next meeting.
Okay.
So we'll have some update.
Except on the ambulance.
I can send something around before that.
I'm just writing down of anything I'm committed to.
There we go. It'll be in writing.
Remember.
We'll get it out next few days.
Okay?
Do I hear a motion that we should adjourn?
See you.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. I missed it.
So,
Yeah, Hank wants
to go home. He's been here a long
Thanks, everybody.
Who motioned? I didn't.